Hey, welcome back, y'all, to the Bleav in Texans podcast. I'm your host, Cecil Short III, and we have a special guest today, Joe Deleone, a CF football, I'm sorry, college football and NFL draft analyst for the Bleav Network. He's an expert. I've heard nothing but good things about him. And guess what, y'all? He loved what the Houston Texans did in the NFL draft. So today, we're kind of going to go through some picks. Let him dive into it, tell us why, let him show his expertise, have a few questions for him, and then get him out of here. But Joe, man, thanks for coming on today.
Yeah, I'm more than excited to talk about this draft class, and I've spent a lot of time weirdly like looking at this Texans offseason and what they needed to get done during this draft class, and they hit a home run. We'll dig into it, but they couldn't have done a better job of preparing themselves for this upcoming season.
Well, let me ask you this. They traded out the first round, right? They were sitting at 25. There was rumors that they tried to move up in the top 10, but they couldn't get there, whether it was for Banks or I kind of sneakily think it might have been for a tight end, maybe. That's
Mm.
just my secret, my opinion. Are you okay with them trading back and getting higher in the second round, or is there somebody there based on the offseason that you loved at the end of the first round?
Yeah, I think that after you're not able to move up, which was kind of what the rumor was coming into the draft, was that they needed to address offensive line at some point in their first three picks, two picks, maybe even sooner than that. So you got to move up in this year's class with how quickly the linemen were coming off the board. If you weren't able to move up, their best move was trading back. One of the things that was talked about by so many analysts, including myself, was that this draft class wasn't bad. It just didn't have the typical amount of first round players that it usually does. So most of the guys that were around pick 20 up until the end of the second round, they all had very similar grades for most of these teams. Most of these guys were bunched in the same group. It's why a lot of the post-draft grades that you see put out there by a lot of analysts right now, they're all in that B range because a lot of teams got good players, not elite players, but just good players that are going to do some great things. So I think trading back, accumulating some more capital allowed for them to take advantage of the depth and the ability to find some future starters. So I like that move. Don't overthink it. Let a desperate team like the Giants move up to go get a quarterback and take full advantage.
Okay, so they did that, and pick number 34 is Jaden Higgins, receiver out of Iowa State. I love the kid. Just watching his film, I didn't realize how dynamic he was with the ball in his hands after the catch. I'm like, wow, this kid is impressive. But at pick 34, is this a first? Did you have a first round grade on him? And then can you explain why you love Jaden Higgins?
I had an early second on him,
Okay.
and I had a very similar grade. I know we're going to talk about Jalen Noel in a second, but I had very similar grade with him and Jalen Noel. I really loved Higgins because of the size that he brings to the position. He's got really good length. He uses it really well to win at the catch point, to extend, to make plays and secure the ball. He's got pretty good, reliable hands. But for a guy who's 6'4", the way that he's able to change direction, the way that he's able to transition, that stuff's special. Like that's where he can end up becoming like the true X in this offense to consistently create separation and space for himself. That's always a big talking point when we've got taller receivers is, can they win outside of winning in the air? And I think that he absolutely can. I think that he's going to be able to use his feet really well to make clean cuts. And again, to completely find space every single time. I posted during the Senior Bowl, there was this one rep that he had and I got like a ton of people chimed in on this of like, wow, this is just an amazing rep one-on-one where he just so smoothly redirects his momentum from one way to the other. And when you're that tall, it's a lot harder to be able to redirect going right and then all the way back to the left. And that smoothness, I think, shows up on film all the time. This was great value where they picked him.
I tell you what, what's the kid out of Arizona?
Tedero McMillan.
I thought Jaden was a smoother route runner than
I
Ted.
agree. I agree.
Like and I played with Mike Evans, I played with Vincent Jackson, I played with
Right.
DeAndre Hopkins, all bigger guys, right? And like you said, it's hard for them to bend and be able to get in and out of breaks. And Jaden just looks smooth. Do you think he's a plug and play? Second round pick high, he should be a plug and play at probably the outside receiver, correct?
Yeah, I think that he should be. And if you're drafting a guy that early, you want him to step in and play right away. And I just think that if you look at the current Texans receiver room, it's a good receiver room. but he fits a role that I think that they needed to fill. And you don't even need to necessarily just play him at X. I mean, there's a chance that you could end up moving him around and have him play in different spots depending on how you want to prioritize Nico Collins. But yeah, to that point, I think that he is immediate plug and play, drop him in, let him go to work.
All right, now later in the second round, number 48, pick number 48, Big Tay Ursery from Minnesota. Tell us about him.
Yeah, this pick, and as I mentioned, that they needed to get offensive line help after they took Jaden Higgins. I was like, okay, I like the pick, but man, where are they going to get a offensive lineman? Where are they going to boost their offensive line? The options are starting to dwindle. Ariante Ursery was their best option there at pick 16. He was a player who a lot of folks were saying could go in the end of the first round. He brings one of the better floors to the offensive line, to an offensive line prospect. He brings one of the better floors for an offensive line prospects, what I meant to say. This Texans O-line went over a complete rework. The rumor was that they were trying to get just a completely different vibe. They wanted to get new faces in there that were going to all play cohesively together because things were not moving in the right direction at the end of last season. They were not playing well together. So I think having a guy who's just high floor, who's going to be steady, who's going to be reliable, who can plug in realistically probably at right tackle, knowing that you just brought in Cam Robinson. Maybe you value Ursery better at left tackle and you want to just see where you can slot Robinson in a different spot. But I think that having the issues that you had with your O-line over the last couple of years, CJ Stroud being hit as much as he was, being one of the most sacked quarterbacks in the NFL over that span, the steadiness is what makes me like a pick like this instead of swinging for somebody who's a little bit more upside or taking a Josh Simmons who is a bit of a question mark because he's coming into the season banged up, coming off of an injury. You don't know how completely ready to go a guy like that is going to be. So I'm overall, I feel very strong and feel pretty confident about a pick like this, just working out and being a reliable player for this Texans O-line.
Is he a plug and play guy? And let me ask you this, can he play guard? I feel like a lot of the issues that happened with the Houston Texans last year was the interior offensive lineman, right? Center, left guard, right guard. And they brought some guys in free agency, but he's a bigger guy too. So 6'6", kind of at guard. I'm not sure he can do it, but what's your thoughts?
Yeah, I just think that like naturally for him, he's not one of the. When I look for a guard, I'm looking for a guy that like sinks really well, that like gets
Yeah.
super low and is able to get underneath tackles. That wasn't something that like screamed to me on film that he's like a super low leverage player. He wins because he's got great length. He's got over 33-inch arms. He's got a really big base. He's your prototypical tackle. I would feel much better if he comes in and he plays that right tackle spot. Personally, like having watched Blake Fisher as much as I did over the last couple of years, being a Notre Dame fan, I'd much rather bump Blake Fisher in to one of the tackle spots or his job is on the line. The interesting thing from like what I had heard when Fisher was at Notre Dame, they had approached him about moving to guard because they thought he would be a better guard. He ended up sticking at tackle for Notre Dame. But ultimately, yeah, he might be the better player to move just because like physically he fits the prototype better of being a guard compared to Ursery.
I tell you what, it's an interesting offensive line room right now.
Yes.
With the additions they made, but I'm all for competition. I think that's huge. I think that's huge. I love that you mentioned Blake Fisher. Maybe possibly him moving down the guard, better fit for him. That'll be something to keep an eye on. But they have a lot of names, a lot of veterans in there now as well, and some young guys like Drew Shrugs from Penn State a couple years ago, Jared Patterson. So we'll see how that turns out. That's something to keep an eye on. All right, pick number 79, Jalen Noel. Jalen Noel. Now I gotta ask you, they picked up Christian Kirk in the offseason. Isn't this kind of the same player?
I mean, I got to be honest. I don't disagree with that thought, but I got to be honest. Christian Kirk better be watching his back because Jalen Noel is a really, really good player. He is one of these guys that just was so widely, highly regarded, everybody that I talked to. And I got the chance to talk to him. He came on the A to Z Film Room channel that I do with A to Z Sports, is the network that I work for. We were able to get him on, and he was one of the best interviews that I've had because he was super down to earth. He was super confident in himself. And I think that it translates to the way that he plays on the field. I love this for Christian Kirk, who I know is, he's been a little bit inconsistent. I think he's going to knock him off because of what I have seen from Noel on film. He reminds me a lot of Steve Smith, the former Ravens and Panthers receiver, just gritty, aggressive, not afraid to hit you, kind of plays like a running back in the slot. There's a lot of different faces that can contribute for this Texans receiver room. But I think that the one that has the most upside and the most potential does end up being Noel. And the last part about this, when I spoke to Noel and we interviewed him, one of the things I asked him about, I was like, hey, can you tell me about your teammate, Jaden Higgins? Like, what's your guys' relationship like? How has this process been for you? And he was just gushing about the chemistry that the two of them have, that how much they love playing together and how they're super close to one another. So the fact that we're building off of that chemistry, and you saw in film how well they played opposite of each other and alongside each other, I think that is like the biggest win for both of these players to take that next step.
I tell you what, it's interesting how, I shouldn't say interesting. Jalen's very competitive, and you see it on film. Like when that Steve Smith comparison, I see it in his competitiveness. Like, he gets after it. There was multiple catches, 50-50 balls he coming down with. Great with his routes. He was just very impressive on film. Let me ask you about this, though. I think in 2023, maybe his sophomore season, junior season, was he a 4-year guy or a 3-year guy?
I believe he was a 4-year guy, if I remember correctly.
So his junior year, he had a few drops. Senior year, I think it was like a 7 point something percent. This year, it went down to a 4 point something percent. Is that anything you are worried about, or is he going to be just fine?
I think he's going to be just fine. And I think that when you listen to certain guys talk, you can tell that there's an attention to detail, to improvement, and needing to get better. I also, if you watch the film, and I don't mean to throw Rocco Becht under the bus, but like there was a lot of inconsistency from Rocco Becht, especially this year. This is a big reason why I like Jaden Higgins so much, is that you're seeing him readjust and contort his body and use his really good body control to make plays and come down with the football. Like, that looked good on film, but then when we peel it back, it's like, okay, that ball placement's, it's tough. I think that might have contributed a bit to it, because he just wasn't that same level of accurate that we were hoping to have from back to this upcoming season. So I think that there's just a lot of variables that come into play with something like that.
Man, you got the Iowa State teammates, which is pretty cool. And I think Nick Caserio, the GM, he goes back to Iowa State a good amount, because I think they know what type of player they're getting from Iowa State. Tough, physical, they're going to compete, which fits the Texans culture a lot. So it's pretty cool to see those teammates go back-to-back in round 2 and 3. Now, moving on to pick number 97 in the 3rd round, they traded up for this guy, USC DB, Jalen Smith. What you know about this young man?
Yeah, this was a really quiet, good pick, because there's so many other corners that were talked about, and there's so many other slot corners that were talked about during this class. For him to just be able to provide depth and provide it at a high level, I think is what you're getting from Jalen Smith. He tested pretty well for a compact player at around 5'10", ran a 4.45, which is a great number. He's relatively explosive, had some pretty good jumps at the combine. I think that when you're taking a prospect like this, where they did in the 3rd round, you're not necessarily looking for a starting player. You're not necessarily saying like, oh, okay, we're taking this guy. He is going to start on the outside for us. He's going to start in the nickel for us. You already have one of the better young secondaries with Jalen Petrie, with Kalen Bullock, with Kamari Lassiter, and of course with Derek Stingley. My mind was escaping me for a second. There's so many names I've had to keep track of over the last week. But with Derek Stingley, this is such a good secondary. And I think that having another good athlete just into the mix, a little bit more different body types that you can turn to, that's what you're being presented with Jalen Smith. I
agree. I think depth is critical. I think when you look at what the Texans DB room looks like at corner, outside of Kamari Lassiter and Derek Stingley Jr., of course, the only guys that, as a strictly corner, that's played a lot of playing time is Ron Darby, who's a former high pick from Florida State, I believe. So to bring him in learn from those young guys, always bring competitiveness in there. And then also, man, you got CJ Gardner-Johnson, you got Jalen Petrie, Kalen Bullock. It's just a deep Jimmy Ward. It's a deep room, and the cream will rise to the crop.
Yeah.
And they battled some injuries the last few years in the secondary. So the more depth you have in this passing league today is going to be critical. All right, now the last guy, not the last guy, but the last guy we're going to dive in depth to, Woody Marks. He was picked 116. I believe that's the fourth round. Running back from USC. Not a lot of people, I think, outside of you being a draft expert, know about Woody Marks. So please fill us in on what Woody can do.
First of all, I was really surprised and also disappointed by the amount of people that were critical of them trading up to go and get Woody Marks. I thought that this was a great pick for what you needed for your running back room. He is a tremendous receiver. He was one of the best receiving running backs in the in college football this past year. Reliable hands, but he's one of these guys that just has like really awesome vision in space. You see that he's able to evaluate things opening up in front of him, and he's going to attack those gaps with really good athleticism. I think with how the running back room was last year, and you still have Joe Mixon, who slowly getting older running backs. We know how they start to tail off towards the end of their careers, especially a physical guy like Joe Mixon, but you still have this physical presence with him. And then when you have a player like that, you need somebody who is an opposite skill set. You need somebody who's going to do well in blitz pickup. You need a guy on third down that you can throw the ball to in a swing route, throw him screens to win in space and just kill opposing defenses. I think that this Woody Marks pick, we're really learning that this Texans team is going all in and fully committing to attacking downfield and throwing the football. And I think that having one more piece into a different position group is exactly how you're going to be able to effectively accomplish it. As people want to gripe about the trade up, I don't think they realize that certain players are more important for different teams. And that was going to be the case this year with this draft class, with the depth at running back, the depth at other positions like defensive tackle and edge. Being able to prioritize the one guy who would have been best for you and not letting him slip, I think was a good move.
That's actually interesting. So you talked about Woody Marks, how good of a pass catcher he is. You talked about Jalen Noel. You talked about Jaden Higgins, or Jaden Higgins and Jalen Noel. So many Jadens and Jalen's here. Now, I wonder if they will start to spread that offense out a little bit more and maybe go pass first to open up the run, right? We haven't seen Nick Caley. He's never been offensive coordinator. So that'd be something interesting to watch. But you made a good point. They are really surrounding CJ Stroud with some key weapons, and especially in the draft and in free agency. So that'll be something to watch. Now, the next two rounds. No, I'm sorry. In the sixth round, they drafted two guys. Jaden Reed, safety from Penn State, and Graham Mertz, quarterback from Florida. In the seventh round, they drafted Keontae Hamilton, D tackle from Rutgers, and Luke Lackey, tight end from Iowa. Now, normally sixth, seventh round guys, depth pieces, maybe possible practice squad guys, guys they see maybe high potential in. Give me one or two guys that stand out to you that can possibly make the team. And then talk about Graham Mertz for me, please, because to me, you draft a quarterback. You got your quarterback, right? But why draft a guy in the sixth round? What do they see in Graham?
Yeah, first of all, by the way, I'm noticing how hilarious this is to the point that you just brought up. They drafted 3 Jalens, all spelled, I think, differently too. No, 2 are spelled the same way. So I don't know what the obsession is with all these Jalens. That's gonna be a very confusing meeting room. I'll tell you that much. But Jalen Reed is the one guy on day 3 that caught my attention the most, and I think that as we just discussed, how strong the secondary was for this team last year, and also more importantly, how promising it has been, and how like the upside that it has shown that it can be. I think that Jalen Reed could end up not challenging, but end up pushing his way as that second free safety on this team. He was somebody for Penn State this year. They had a tremendous defense, showed some really nice instincts, some decent ball skills. He was really just a strong decision maker when the ball was in the air. I think that those coverage capabilities are what you're looking for in a day 3 pick to establish more depth. I love this approach that a lot of teams try to build through the line of scrimmage, and they've already done that, knowing that you need to like really pave a foundation for your secondary, that you have so many different body types to turn to, so many different play styles to turn to. That is why I keep coming away from this draft thinking that like this is really underrated how they approach this. The other guy that I think I keep an eye on is Luke Lakey, who has been productive, a little inconsistent. I just don't know if he's going to make this roster because there's just so many tight ends in the mix here with Brevin Jordan and Cade Stover. And I forgot that Irv Smith Jr. is technically listed on this team. So
was he a first-round pick?
I forget if he was a first-round pick.
He was a high pick.
He was very highly picked though, and he hasn't really lived up to the hype. But you've got like all these guys that were productive at one point and were hyped up at one point. So Lakey's the one where like he's a bit of a wild card. Iowa tight ends we know are always good football players, so maybe there's a shot that he does something. Last to get to Graham Mertz that you asked me about, I wouldn't be shocked if Graham Mertz doesn't end up making this roster as the second quarterback, or maybe he ends up just being the practice squad guy that sticks around for a really long time. With Mertz, he had a very up and down career. He was very highly sought after. He was, I Bleav, the highest quarterback recruit ever to commit to Wisconsin. Has a couple of really good games. Everybody's super excited about him. And I know I'm making Brandon, the producer, cringe as I'm talking about his performance at Wisconsin. He told us he was a Wisconsin guy, but he transfers to Florida. I and many others were thinking, man, Billy Napier is screwed. This Mertz kid's not very good. He was the only option that he had. And he got a lot out of Graham Mertz. I saw a guy that was a much better decision maker. He had great completion percentages for the last 2 years. It just was awful that he suffered the injury that he did. And then he has the brutal circumstance of being banged up with DJ Lagway, who is going to be a superstar, who's probably going to be a first-round pick in 2027. He's going to be a top 5 pick. He's so gifted right behind him. And Florida fans, and what kept Billy Napier and got him back for another year this upcoming year was of how good DJ Lagway was. I think that tells me not only was he a good player on the field, not only did he show the steadiness and the ability to keep an offense on schedule, which you want from a backup, but also showed good leadership. It's really easy in this modern era for a player to be very selfish and to want to prioritize themselves. But I felt like with Graham Mertz, he was nothing but upstanding, and you only heard and saw great things from him. I kind of joke about this. Whenever you talk about a quarterback, the intangibles being the first thing you bring up, it usually means that they're not great. But I think when you're talking about a backup quarterback in this circumstance, it is important. And I think that it's the type of just overall profile that you look for somebody that could end up being the second or third quarterback on your roster.
All right, before I let you go, give me a draft grade for the Houston Texans, and then your favorite, no, not your favorite. Who is the prospect out of the just draft class that you think is going to make the biggest impact for the Houston Texans?
They were one of my A grades. I had 5 teams that I gave an A, and I tweeted this out, which sparked me hopping on because I was so congratulatory of what the Texans did. I gave him an A. I don't like giving out A pluses because I think you got to like really hit a home run to get an A plus, but I gave him an A for really boosting their passing attack. And the inconsistent health availability of their receivers, having so many different options, is so significant. And then also finding a starting offensive lineman in the second round is often unheard of. It's hard to come by. So getting Ariante Ursary was awesome. But the one player, to answer your question, who I think is going to be the most impactful, it to me is Jalen Noel. I really think a lot of teams, like the Lions, who traded up for Isaac Tesla to take him, I Bleav Kyle Williams went ahead of Jalen Noel. There were a bunch of receivers that were good players, but are not as good as Jalen Noel in my eyes. I just think that kid is wired the right way. He's focused the right way. And I think that his play style not only translates to what this offense is going to be trying to do out of the slot, but that Steve Smith comp sticks in my head. Steve Smith, man, just had an edge the way that he played, and it turned into some massive production. I think that the same thing is going to happen here for Noel.
Well, Joe, I appreciate you coming on, man. Please like, follow, and subscribe to the Bleav in Texas podcast. Oh, Joe, tell us where we can find you and follow you at, please.
Yeah, follow me on Twitter at Joe Deleone, and head on over to the A to Z Sports Film Room channel, where me and my co-host Ryan Roberts have been doing grades and breakdowns for all these teams. But Cecil, this was a blast. This was awesome getting to talk some ball with you, and looking forward to doing it again soon.
Sounds good, brother. All right, fans, take care. See y'all later.